Welcome to the Freelancing Friends podcast, the podcast that gives you the insight you need to become the best freelancer you can be. Be sure to head on over to freelancingfriends.co.uk, join the community, and enhance your freelancing career today. In today's episode, we're joined by Rachel Pease, an award-winning marketing consultant and owner of Mash Marketing Consultancy. We discuss balancing freelancing and full-time employment, the biggest surprises once going freelancing full-time, and an honest look back on Rachel's freelancing career so far. Rachel, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. So, what I generally like to do, obviously with every episode, is get a bit of an intro about the guest. So that can be anything from obviously what you're currently doing, back through to your experience and kind of what led you to where you are today. So I will hand over to you at this point and let you introduce yourself.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Rachel, and my specialism is in marketing. I've worked in marketing for probably just over 16 years now, across lots of different roles, lots of different industries. But then about a year and a half ago, I decided to go freelance. I think I was quite tentative about it, so I started off by having it balanced alongside doing my employed role as head of marketing, with the trialing the freelancing on the side, with a view to reining my days back as I went on the employed side, to see how it went. And then a year later, so June last year, decided to bite the bullet, go fully freelance, give it a proper go. Because I think what I was finding was, while it was, from a risk perspective, it was good to have both going while I trialed it. My head was never properly in the freelance space. I didn't have enough, bandwidth to give it everything needed. So since June last year, yeah, I've been fully in it, and yeah, absolutely loving it. Almost wonder why I didn't do it sooner.
Perfect. Now, I know quite a few people took a relatively similar approach, myself included.
Yeah.
Um, Although I think I only lasted a few months of kind of doing both at the same time. I know a lot of it
Yeah.
comes down to obviously, the clients that you've got, you can kind of mitigate that risk a bit more, build up your client base, obviously a bit slower in the background,
Yeah.
and you've still kind of obviously got your salary coming in every month from employment as well. How did you find kind of balancing employment and freelance? I know, as you said there, you felt like you couldn't have your head fully into the freelancing side of things, but obviously in the back
Yeah.
of your mind, you were wanting to grow it, find new clients, make it more feasible. So, how did you
Yeah.
find that kind of process of managing both of them at the same time, and what really
Yeah.
made you, I suppose, decide to make that jump to freelance full time and think I'll kind of pack in the employment now?
I won't lie, it was a real struggle balancing both. My employed role, as I said, I was head of marketing. I had a team of at one point 17 people to manage. So even when I reduced my days back and the days that were supposed to be for my freelancing, there were inevitably things in the employed role that I ended up having to deal with, kept getting drawn back into that. So I just didn't have the space to really concentrate on the freelance side of things. And like I said, I think what made me finally do it was, I thought, I've given it a year of trialing it alongside, had built up enough of a sort of client base or interest levels for people that wanted to work with me, to think, right, you know what, if I don't do it now, it's never going to happen, because I'm going to keep getting drawn back into the employed side. And yeah, I think if you don't try something properly, you never know, do you?
Exactly, and I think sometimes it is best to jump in at the deep end as such, as long as you've kind of mitigated those risks. Did you find that you were working a lot of the time in the evenings and the weekends, obviously on the freelance side of things, to kind of keep that
Yeah,
churning over?
100%. When I was juggling both, yeah, definitely working evenings, weekends. And that's been the nice thing about being fully freelance. So, now my time's all up to me. If I want to work in the evening, I can. If I want a morning off, to go and do something retrospectively, it works that way as well. I can work weekends if I want, but it's just nice to have that flexibility to manage my own time.
No, definitely. I mean, that was the biggest plus point for me, I think, and one of the things that really made me take that jump. I've probably said 100 times before, so people are bored of hearing it, but I struggle with sleeping quite a lot or falling asleep. My mind's quite active, so obviously going
Right.
freelance, it was the case of sometimes if I've not fallen asleep until 3, 4 in the morning, I'll just push the alarm back a bit later as long as I don't have a call, and instead of working like a
Yeah.
zombie all day, be a bit more with it, shall we say. So obviously you were kind of juggling the employment and the freelance. It was taking up a lot of your time. But I think obviously in the back of your mind, freelance was the end goal to kind of go full time doing
Yeah.
that. How did you go around finding clients, or even without clients, how did you go about finding new leads to try and sign off to obviously boost the salary or revenue that you can make freelance?
Yeah, so probably a big part of it right from the beginning was networking. So obviously it was kind of a similar time you'd set up your group, which has been fantastic. Just kind of the people on there all in the same boat, wanting to support each other, which was brilliant. But I also joined a couple of other networking groups. So I'm part of a BNI group. I don't know if you've heard of Business Networking International, and that's a group that we meet every week and support each other with referrals for possible business opportunities. But what I found with them as well, and any networking group like yours as well, it's not just the business opportunities that are really great. It's that support network of people who are in the same boat, who are wanting you to do well, championing you really, kind of your own set of cheerleaders who have advice about all the different parts of going freelance and the business side of it and considerations that you didn't even know existed until you got into it, and they've been so supportive with that. But yeah, a lot of the leads have come through those networking pieces. But the other big side of it for me has been LinkedIn, literally just an organic LinkedIn presence. So regular posting, regular engaging with people commenting on their posts, and growing kind of my business page side of it as well. And just having that balance between business posts and a little bit of your personal story to really engage people. And I've had so many people contact me just off the back of doing that, which is, I feel really lucky to be in that position.
Yeah, I think people obviously might think I'm biased at some level, but I always push kind of the community and just your network personally as well as being one of the
Yeah,
biggest drivers. So, I mean, for me, LinkedIn was and probably still is the biggest driver of the leads that come to me and my clients that end up signing
yeah,
off. Even some of those might be referrals, but they'll generally contact you through LinkedIn as well. So I put quite a lot of emphasis on that when I talk to people as being, make sure you've got that presence. You don't have to be,
yeah.
a huge thought leader in the space. Sometimes that puts people off. You don't need to be posting 10 times a day trying to,
No,
sell a course of how to make 1 million in 3 hours, which would be nice.
no.
Um,
It's the
but
same,
yeah,
yeah. It's the same with anything, isn't it? You want a balance. I think if you're in people's faces all the time, it's too much. But if you don't show up very often at all, then they forget about you. So it's finding what's right for you really that fits in with your own kind of work schedule as well, because it does take a lot of time to be regularly posting and come up with great content that's going to engage people. So it is that balance, just what works for you.
yeah, definitely. And I've always found, again, another reason for me wanting to go freelance was to kind of be a bit more true to myself, which might sound a bit cheesy, but you can obviously
No, not
handpick
at
the
all.
clients that you work with.
Yeah,
There's less risk, I suppose, or there's less friction of being who you are, even on your socials. So obviously with my
yeah,
LinkedIn, I kind of just, I am me, and that's how I push myself on there. I'm not gonna shy away from an opinion on something or whatever it might be. So I
yeah,
find it's quite nice to, especially as a freelancer or someone who's self-employed, is to really be able to be yourself. And if a client doesn't like it, or a potential lead or anyone sees it and doesn't like it, you probably
yeah.
don't want to work
Then
with
it
them
just, yeah.
anyway. So
No, just means they're not for you. But no, it's definitely a good point. Certainly when you're working for a company, you have to be careful about what you're posting because it obviously shows where you work, it reflects on the company. But when it's just you, it's almost a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? You can say what you want, but you accept the consequences, and it's all on you. But yeah, absolutely being yourself. At the end of the day, there's a lot of freelancers out there offering similar services, and clients tend to choose people based on whether they've got that rapport with them, whether that relationship feels like it's there. So being yourself is a really good way to let people know, oh, you sound like you might be a good fit for me.
That's it. And I think, obviously, as we've kind of touched on there as well, that's how you can really build rapport with clients and obviously find the people that not only you think you get along with, but they want to get along with you as well. And
Yeah,
obviously, if you work at an agency or wherever else it might be, the clients tend to come and sign off based on what the agency can offer. As a freelancer, it is you. You are your product essentially. The services are kind of, I suppose, supplementary to you as a person. So no,
yeah,
it's always
definitely.
top of my list to give advice to people of just be yourself and don't be afraid. But I think
Yeah,
something interesting that you touched on, obviously, when you were talking about the communities and kind of building up your network there, was the advice and questions around things that you don't normally associate with marketing if you've worked in marketing at an agency or in house, for example, which
yeah,
obviously come down to the more business based side of things. What were
yeah.
the things that really, I suppose, jumped out to you as being, oh, I didn't think of this, or maybe it's a bit more complicated than I thought it would be? What were those things that were really, oh, yeah, I need
Oh
some.
goodness, yeah, whole range of things. I mean, I guess firstly, even when something as simple as setting your rates and your pricing, you kind of base it on, well, okay, I can work, so many hours a day, so many days a week. But I kind of thought, right, I've got all of this time, but at first I didn't account for the extra time I would need for, the admin side of it, the email communications, the calls with clients in between, the managing your own finances, creating invoices, tracking all the financial side of it. And that was certainly a big one. I think the mistake that I made at the beginning, and a lot of freelancers do, is trying to do everything themselves. Whereas I'm now firmly of the opinion, do what you're good at, concentrate on what you're good at doing, which for me is the marketing side. So now, I have an accountant that looks after all of that financial side of things so that I don't have to worry about it. I'm not there yet, but I'm considering getting the support of a virtual assistant for a little bit of administration support. I think it's just about being kind to yourself, not trying to think, right, I'm on my own now, I have to do absolutely everything, and realizing that support is out there, with people who are really good at what they're doing and can do it far faster than you can, and then it's not wasting your time, so you can concentrate on the things you should be concentrating on.
Yeah, I mean the finance side of things was, I suppose, the big one for me. Um, like you, I kind of stopped and thought, I don't have to do everything myself. So
Yeah,
luckily for me, when I look back on it, I did go for an accountant straight away, which has saved me countless hours. Because
yeah,
if I don't understand it, I'll just ask them and they'll explain it. But even outside of the accounting, it's literally, as you say, the invoicing. What tool should I use or what software should I use for the invoicing? The legal side of those as well. What should my payment schedule be? How
yeah,
do we figure all this out and what's best? And I think, especially in the past, I think it has changed a lot now. I think in the past it used to be freelancers were kind of their own separate entity, just kind of in the background. They weren't really, a group of people kind of sharing this information. And
mm,
there's obviously some stuff that you're not going to share. It's a bit more personal to you and your business. But in general, it is, if you can say to someone, oh, what invoicing software do you use? If you can ask even three people and they all come back and they've either got different answers or something pops
yeah,
up more often, it's kind of getting that, I suppose, peer review on the systems as well. There's countless softwares out there for everything to do with business. I mean,
yeah.
contracts were another one that were, yeah, they were something I was not looking forward to doing, and I did not
Yeah,
enjoy doing
terms
them.
and conditions. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's there's the nice part of it in terms of you have that control, so you can choose obviously the payment terms. How long do people have to pay? Can we put anything in there to say if payment's not received in X amount of days, the work will pause? Right down to this is the work I will offer, and I do not offer XYZ, and make it
Yeah.
very clear in obviously the contract itself. So I think that's a nice part about it. There are the stressful sides of, I'm going to call it the life admin of being a freelancer, but
Yeah.
in general, I think overall you have that control. It is all on your terms. One
Yeah.
thing that you did mention was obviously about deciding your rates. Now, I'm not asking you
Yeah.
to tell me exactly what your rates are. I never do that with anyone, but I do find it
Yeah.
interesting of the thought process that you went through to kind of decide on those rates. What was that process? Because again, it is something quite close to people's hearts, and they keep it close to
Yeah.
the chest. So there's not obviously countless data out there to say, oh, a tech SEO freelancer charges X amount on average. So there's not really anything
No,
to
it
look
can
at. So
vary. It can vary massively, can't it? Yeah. Well, for me, I suppose I started, I worked backwards really. So I thought about, how much income I'd need in order to get what I needed to, live my life, pay the bills, etc., as kind of a target that I had to have, and then kind of looked at a target that included some of the nice to haves, so a bit extra for holidays, the other things I wanted to do, and kind of went somewhere in the middle of those two amounts. But then when it comes to actually pricing for different clients, I am. It's really important to me to be very flexible, because I have clients in all manner of circumstances. So some who are startups, who have this amazing business idea, really passionate about it, but no idea really how to make it a reality, where to start from a marketing perspective, how to reach their customers, sometimes even who their customers are. But with them, certainly they don't have a lot of budget at the start. So I always work at a pace and a budget that they're comfortable with. So it's often, not an immediate thing. It's doing a little bit each month, focusing on the things that are most important to them first and then working it through. Um, Whereas other clients who are kind of, it's still usually sort of small to medium sized businesses, but ones that are a bit more established, they often come to me because they're not quite hitting their sales targets, their business pipeline isn't quite there, and so for them, I do a review of their current marketing activity, look at what's working, what's not, make suggestions on ways to improve it, and come up with a plan for them to actually action and implement. And for them, it can be a little bit more involved, a bit more of my time. So the rates for them can sometimes be a little bit more, but I really sort of flex it based on what the person wants, what's achievable for them, and working at a pace that works for them. Whoever they are, whatever their business.
that's it. And I think it's always important to kind of have that level of flexibility where, maybe you're going to be on a lower rate, or that could just be a lower amount of hours or days per month to
Yeah,
begin with. But it is kind of remembering, you're building up that rapport, you're building up that relationship. As you move further down the line, we can start
yeah,
upping them, which is always a difficult conversation in itself. But that's another topic. Um,
yeah,
but I think one of the interesting points that you said there, obviously, so I did something very similar. I looked at what is the baseline, what are my living costs, where I
yeah,
can pay all my bills, pay the mortgage, and still have a little bit of money left for treats, like not
yeah.
nothing big, but
Treats is a good way to phrase it. Yeah,
yeah, do I
yeah,
want to be able to, sometimes maybe go out for a meal once a month, like, so what's that baseline that I've got, and then from there
yeah,
thinking, so that's exactly how much I do need. There's no way around that. How much
yeah,
would I like to be kind of earning to, obviously, as you said, look at the bigger treats? So, can we go on holiday? Do we need a new car? Whatever it might be. But the
yeah.
holiday one is interesting to me, especially from a freelance perspective. And I don't know if you've kind of took a holiday yet, other than obviously kind of the festive period that we've just had. Um,
Yeah, no, I have. It's certainly an interesting one, and it's another thing you don't really think about, isn't it, when you first start out? Because when you're in an employed role, you stick your out of office on, and usually it's contact so and so in my absence. When you're on your own, there's no one to put on your out of office.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I think for me it was definitely a bit of an eye opener. I've had a few holidays, um, definitely something I need to do more of. But
Yes.
how did you find, obviously in itself, how did you find that process? But how do you go about, or how do you feel like in future you will go about managing those holidays in terms of, the clients knowing that you're away, kind of actually being able to shut off and and enjoy the
Yes.
holiday?
Yeah.
What's your kind of process there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, holidays are and always have been, always will be really important to me. When I work really hard, but it was something my grandma said to me when I was young: work hard, play hard. And I fully do both. So I have had a couple of holidays already. And the way I've approached it is just making sure that I'm letting clients know well in advance. Even just having it on the bottom of my email signature to say away so and so date to so and so date, but just keeping them fully abreast. I mean, I have weekly catch ups with all of them anyway, so it comes into conversation when you're having, those relationship chats, so that they're fully aware. But it is very important to me to have a complete break when I'm away. So I don't tend to check email, and I've been quite good at that. But what I do say to them is, if there is anything absolutely urgent, here's my mobile number and you can text or WhatsApp if there is an emergency. But the lucky thing about what I do is it's not like, I'm not a web developer, so I'm not having customers contact me to say, oh, my website's crashed, it's gone down, it's urgent, I need it. It's more kind of the strategy and the planning. So there's never really anything that's absolutely emergency needs looking at now. So I'm quite lucky in that respect. Um, yeah, but yeah, absolutely taking a proper break is something I think, is important to everyone, to switch off, to recharge. Because it's so easy, isn't it? Especially when it's your own business, to get so keen and engaged with it and into it that you just go and go and go and don't stop. And then you get to a point where you're like, oh my God, I'm going to completely burn out without almost having realized that you've got there.
Definitely, and it's something that I've been guilty of in the past. Obviously, I've done the freelancing for kind of 2 years full time now.
Yeah,
The first time I did go on holiday, admittedly, it was, I suppose you'd call it a staycation, so it was still within the UK. But there
yeah.
was the feeling inside me, I need to take my laptop just in case. I don't mind if the laptop's there because I need to invoice, because we're maybe at the end of the month. That's a more enjoyable experience to do. But
Yeah.
I think after that, it was, kind of thinking, I definitely need to have that full break. So if I go on holiday now, obviously the laptop stays at home. Um, the emails aren't checked. I'll happily remove the work email from my phone for that time period. And I think, as
Yeah,
you said, it's important to let the clients know as soon as possible. So literally, as soon as I book in a holiday, I email the clients. I'll be out at this time,
yeah.
just to let you know, and then remind them obviously a bit close to the time. But yeah, I think when it's your own business, there's sometimes you feel pressures that aren't actually technically there. I think I found with a lot of
Mm.
my clients, I've actually had a client turn around to me before and say, "You need to take more time off," and I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry."
Yeah,
So
that's if they've noticed, that's when you know you're in trouble. Yeah.
yeah, I think they tend to be quite a lot more accepting of it as well, though, and understanding. So I think the difference there is obviously when you do work at an agency, as you said, the out of office is on, get in touch with XYZ. From a client
Yeah,
perspective, they know someone else is around. Um, then luckily, if you're a freelancer, they are kind of aware that's not the case. So we'll have to wait. Um,
yeah.
I like that we touched on burnout, though. That sounds like a very weird sentence to say. I don't like burnout, but I think it's a really important topic to cover, especially if you are freelance or just run a business yourself. As we say,
Yeah.
there's those pressures that you feel to always be on. So always check the emails, get back in touch with everyone. What are your kind of top tips, or what your kind of process to really make sure that you aren't having burnout, and kind of preventing that from ever being the case?
I would say just being something that's worked with me for organizing my time in any respect, whatever I'm doing, is to block it out in my diary, have it firmly blocked out. So if I've decided I want to take a Friday afternoon off to go have lunch with a friend and spend a bit of time, as soon as that decision's made, I'll block that time out, and that time does not get touched, does not get moved any way, shape, or form. And just having rules for myself, like my husband works back in the office now. That lots of places are starting to do hybrid. So on the days that he is in the office, we've got a rule where when he gets home, that's my time to switch off, so that we have a proper evening together. And it's just setting yourself little rules really to stick to, and not letting yourself go, oh, just this once I'll work a bit longer, unless obviously there's a massive project on that's got deadlines, which you know about in advance and you plan for. But on the average day to day, just having those set times blocked out that you don't then touch works for me.
Yeah, I often follow something very similar. I like to be quite flexible in terms of my working hours, and as you
Yeah.
say, if anything pops up and it is dramatic and I can fix it, I will do so. But I've got a housemate, and it is literally a case of probably 99% of the time when he gets home, I'll switch off. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Um, Although it is quite hard when you do work in tech on the computer, because then you want to go on the computer after anyway. Um, but I suppose so. What I'm getting from that kind of conversation there is that you work from home full time. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much remote. So most of my meetings with clients are on, via phone call or Zoom. A lot of them have Zoom fatigue, and a few just prefer, an old traditional style phone call. Seems to be happening more and more, which is interesting. But with a new client, I'll do an initial face to face meeting, and then at any milestones, when we've achieved certain things, we'll get together face to face and celebrate with a nice meal or something. So that kind of personal human contact's there. But remote seems to work for clients as much as it does for me. It's far less restrictive on time, having to travel to meet face to face. And it's great because you're not limited to a certain set of geographical location clients. I work across the UK, speaking with a potential client at the moment in America. I work with some people who are over in Amsterdam that sometimes refer clients across to me. So it's so freeing, isn't it? Geographically, you're not limited anymore. Now that the remote world is here.
Yeah, I find that as well. And as I say, kind of with the flexibility of how I enjoy, I class it as my work life. For me, kind of being fully remote, working at home from the spare room, which has now become my office, is kind of really nice. I've worked with clients from countries all over the world that I've never
Yeah,
even thought about before. And I suppose, in a way, as much as we don't like talking about it, that is something that the pandemic did help. Was we kind of had to push into the
massively.
whole,
Yeah,
90% of people had to work from home if they could.
yeah,
So clients also had to obviously deal with that themselves. But there are times when I do sit there and think, do I want to find an office, locally? Do I want to find an office I can rent out each month and go and work there? Have you ever had that kind of thought? Has it ever crossed your mind as to whether or not you'd enjoy doing that?
yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, yeah, I'd love to have my own little office space I could trot off to in the morning. But the reality is, I live in Leeds city centre, so the cost for that for that office space, even if it's a tiny room, would be extortionate for something that I don't really need. Like I say, I pretty much have the house to myself every day with my husband being out at the office. I've got that space that I need here. The difference might be if I ended up eventually kind of taking on people to support, had a bit more of a team again, which is something I'm certainly not thinking about for the moment. But if ever that became the case, then I would potentially look to have some sort of a space where, again, I don't think we'd be in there all the time. Remote works for a lot of people, but just somewhere to get together every now and again for a bit of team building and that face to face contact again. But yeah, certainly for the next couple of years at least, I'm thinking it will just be me on my own. Quite enjoying that at the moment. So no office space for the moment.
Oh, it's very similar for me. It's, sometimes I think to myself, would I be a bit more active? But the likelihood is I wouldn't walk there. There are no offices in walking distance. But, getting out of the house and being around other people, maybe. But then I think, them days when you kind of wake up and I can't really be bothered to travel to the office today. I'll just work from home. I've just invested quite a lot of new equipment for my office as well. And then I'm
Yeah.
thinking, oh, well, I'd have to transport that. I just bought a standing desk and it's curved, so it fits nicely in the room. But I'm thinking that'd be a nightmare to get back out of the room now I've built it in there.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes as well, but as you say, it does come down to, you know, do you need to spend that money as well? And I
Yeah.
think similar to you in future, I think I would like to, but again, that kind of comes down to would it be in a more, I suppose, a collaborative way. So whether I take on people to help
Yeah.
out or
Yeah.
partner up with people to work a lot more closely with them. But I have always found it, people ask me quite a lot, do you not get bored of being in the house? Like, do you not get sick of it? And I was like, to an extent, but then you go outside after so long and you're like, I don't like it. Like, I want to go back.
Yeah, I guess the difference with it being at home is you've got everything set up the way you want it to be. And, there's no rules about, you can't move certain furniture a certain place, or you're in someone else's way, or you can have it, just the way you want that works for you. Which at the end of the day, if you're more comfortable, you're going to end up doing a better job for people. You'll get more business, and it all goes round in a circle, doesn't it?
That's it. And I think, everyone's got their own personal preferences. I do know some people who are freelance that just went straight into an office. And for a lot of people, that works for them. I think,
Yeah.
you just have to do what works for you. But it's a bit of a strange question, but I obviously just touched on investing into the new equipment for myself. And I
Mm.
don't know about you, but I find it very difficult to invest in new equipment. So I kind of did it all at once. Just, okay, I need X, Y, Z. I'm just going to buy it all at once, get it done. Because obviously,
Yeah.
it's classed as a business expense, but being a freelancer, it's also your money at the same time. So for
Yeah.
me, it was difficult, and it still is for anything equipment wise, even though it's 90% of how I make the money is based off the equipment I've got. Have
Yeah.
you found anything similar? Kind of thinking, can I just make do with this for an extra year, or do I need to really get it now?
Yeah, well, I guess for me, sort of equipment wise, it's fairly simple. It's a laptop and a headset. We already had a printer and kind of an office set up anyway, so I didn't really need to get any of that stuff. But I think for me, it's more kind of like the software and the programs that I use to create things for clients. Um, that expense does add up each month, and yeah, absolutely, when it's your own money, you look at it and you think, how often do I actually use that? Is that something I need on a monthly basis, or would it be cheaper to just use something ad hoc when I do? I used the analogy, actually. I was speaking with my husband about it over Christmas. So when it comes to streaming channels, there's so many. If you could never have all of them at once because you spend a fortune. So what we tend to do is over Christmas we took Disney just for a month while we were able to watch them, and then cancel it once the month's done. So it's kind of similar from a professional perspective. If there's anything that I'm paying a monthly charge for and I'm not actually using that frequently, I do kind of regularly look at it and think, oh, can I cut that back for now? Because yeah, at the end of the day, it's your money, isn't it? And you don't have the extortionate budgets that you sometimes have in employed roles to work with.
I really like that analogy because I definitely agree with it myself as well from from the streaming platforms. But
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, for me, it was the software is something that you don't hate the fact that you're paying for it, but I think sometimes you take it for granted if you're working at an agency or in house. You've probably got a
yeah,
big tech stack, it's spread across. Whereas now, when you're paying for it yourself, you're kind of thinking, it's fine, I can be on the lower end of all these tiers and subscriptions, but
yeah,
I didn't realize how many there were that I would need, or you can try and do without it, but eventually you're going to be like, yeah, I really need to
yeah.
do that now. But I think one thing that I always like to ask as well is, obviously, as you said yourself earlier, we've kind of been freelancing for full time for a similar kind of time period. How have you found it? What have been the ups? What have been the downs? And kind of just a real honest opinion on it.
Yeah, so I think kind of when I was first starting out, there were obviously and I'm now aware it'll be the same throughout my freelance career. It'll never change. But there's some months that are a bit better than others. Some months where you're up. Some months where it ends up being a little lower income than you're expecting. And the months where it was a little bit lower or something dropped off that I kind of thought was a certainty, I did get a little bit down on myself and thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing it. Maybe it's not for me. But then you have a word with yourself, don't you? And you pick yourself up and you think, yeah, but last month was great, and it's always going to be like that, a flux of up and down. That's the difference with not having that standard employed regular income. But we kind of knew that when we went ahead and did it, didn't we? So I think that was something that got me down a little bit at the beginning, but now I'm kind of into the flow. Just make sure you've got backup savings for those months that are a little lower. Absolutely fine. But again, I think a lot of people talk about sometimes when you're on your own as well at the beginning, just that lack of communication with people, that lack of office banter when you're kind of in a place with people and people to bounce ideas off. Um, but I have been quite lucky, as I say. I joined a networking group pretty much from the start, so had that not in on an online perspective, not face to face, but I still had those people to share ideas with and say, oh, I'm thinking of this. Do you think that'll work? Um, so yeah, I think it can be a little bit lonely for a lot of freelancers unless they, make take the time to build that network of people, those support people around you that everyone needs really, no matter what you do in your personal life as well as your professional life.
No, it was very similar for me. I think the first couple of months when maybe you are slightly down on the month before from a revenue perspective, or you've got a project coming to an end, and you can kind of sit there and think, oh, have I made the right choice? But it's about really reflecting and thinking back on, was I thinking that last month when everything was great?
Yeah.
It's always going to be the ups and downs, and I think even agencies have that themselves, and unless you are
Oh yeah.
you know
100%.
kind of really in depth with maybe the directors or the founders, you're probably not going to have as much of a clue on how that up and down is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's something which is difficult, and I think it's always best to expect it if you're going to start
Yeah.
being a freelancer. As you said, I think the big thing is making sure you've got backup savings. Like even
Yeah.
before you take that leap, that would be something I always
Yeah,
recommend to people
definitely.
is,
Yeah.
if you can try and save up 1 to 2 months minimum of what we were saying earlier, that very low baseline of this is my living cost, and if I don't earn this, I'm in trouble. um,
Yeah.
but I think it's just kind of being smart with money as well, which again is something that you probably do in your personal life when you are employed as well. But when you go freelance, kind of that line blurs slightly because your business and personal finances kind of come together. Um,
Yeah.
which again is another reason why an accountant is a great shout.
Yeah.
But what I like to ask people on the podcast, so there's a few questions. There's no right or wrong answers. Um, the first one is, what's your advice to anyone that's looking at starting to go freelance in the very near future? So what's like your top advice for that?
Well, because because I'm a marketing consultant, I would say have an actual marketing plan in place. You can be the best in the world at what you do, but if no one knows you're there and offering it, then you're not going to get any business. So have a solid plan in place for, who are your customers, where are they, be in the channels they're in, and have a plan in order to engage them and bring in that business would be my number one tip.
Definitely. And actually that's one that we've not had that answer before, which is interesting,
Oh,
but is
have you
very
not had a marketing person on before?
we have, but that is something that I definitely echo myself though of
Yeah.
we do it for our clients all the time.
Yeah.
Treat yourself as a client now. The next question, and it isn't specific to marketing tools, they can be in there if you want, completely up to you. But what are your
Yeah.
favorite, from I suppose the perspective of being a freelancer and running a business? What are like your top three pieces of software or tools that are basically imperative to what you do and make your life so much easier?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Three. Uh, Okay, one I've been introduced to recently, actually, which I'm finding really helpful, is something called Clockify. Don't know if you've come across it before, but
I
when you're
actually use it
sort of
myself.
jumping, yeah, yeah, when you're jumping between work for different clients, and when it comes to invoicing and how much time you've spent on them, it's just really useful for logging that time. So you're not having to spend ages thinking, oh, how long did I spend on that? How long did I spend on that? So that's been really helpful. Just it takes the pain out of that and helps it massively when it comes to invoicing time. Um, from a marketing perspective, a tool that I've used for a long time, years and years across different roles, is a animated video making tool called Biteable. Extremely cost effective. There's lots of them out there and the prices can get ridiculous and extortionate. But Biteable is one that I've always used. Really easy to use. That you can kind of brand to specific colours, change fonts, add in your own imagery as well as the ones that are in there. And I don't think I've ever had a client yet who hasn't wanted, some of the animated moving content for either their website or their socials, because at the end of the day, it's what grabs customer attention, isn't it? When you're scrolling through, if something's moving, you're going to stop. So that's something that I use quite frequently. And a third one. Um, Probably Capwing that I use for adding captions to video content. Again, accessibility is a big part of what I look at when it comes to marketing materials, to make sure that everyone can access whatever you're putting out there. So certainly for social media, adding captions onto a video where someone's speaking, either for people that are hard of hearing, but a lot of the time people watch videos when they're out and about on the train with the volume off. So adding captions is a huge thing. So I use Capwing to add those on any video content for clients. They're the three that came to mind first, anyway.
Perfect. If they're the ones that came to mind, they are obviously your favourites. That's the way I see it. The next question is very broad, but I think it brings some interesting answers. What's your
Yeah.
favourite thing about working in marketing?
The variety, just especially since going freelance, the complete range of businesses and people and ideas that I get to work with, all with their own unique story, that I can help them tease out and communicate out. It's that just all the difference that keeps me fresh creatively. I think if you work in the same industry for a long time, you kind of it all gets a bit samey. You lose that creative, fresh look at things. So certainly just the different varieties from a kind of keeping me engaged perspective work wise, but just all the different people that you meet as well. It's nice from a personal perspective just to see different people's stories, their amazing business ideas, and kind of helping them along the journey and seeing where it leads them as well. I really enjoy that side of it.
No, definitely. And I think I, again, echo the sentiment there of you meet people from every walk of life with complete
Yeah,
different backstories. And, for me, I think it just seems quite interesting. There's many other jobs where you probably would come across that kind of range of people, but you might not, get as personal with them as you do in marketing. And the
yeah.
final question is, where can people find you online if people want to get in contact? And is there anything specific you want to plug into the podcast?
Oh, well, yeah, people can find me online. I'm on LinkedIn. My company is Mash Marketing Consultancy, and I have a website, www.mash-marketing.co.uk. And things I want to plug, I don't know. Um, I am, well, actually, two things, if you don't mind. So, one of my specialisms is marketing planning for the later life sector. So it's quite niche, not many marketers specialize in it. So helping businesses who have a product or service geared towards the over 50s market. It's something that I've done quite a lot of market research on. I work really closely with the Silver Marketing Association, and I'm currently doing their third market research report. So looking at, how to engage this huge demographic with all this spending power that's often kind of ignored by a lot of marketers or badly misrepresented in advertising, which really puts them off. So that's kind of a bit of a passion of mine, to kind of improve marketing for that particular demographic. But then also this year, new as well as kind of my traditional offering of marketing planning and project management of putting those action plans into place, I'm starting to offer a little bit of training. So towards the back end of last year, there were lots of businesses with business budget cuts. So businesses who had quite a large marketing team that was suddenly slashed, and they ended up with very few marketing people left. And they were thinking, oh goodness, what do we do now? We can't possibly continue to do everything that we were doing. So I'm offering training to those businesses who either have a really limited marketing team on, what are the things to concentrate on? Where can you best spend your time to make sure that you're getting the return that you need? But also businesses who have no marketing team whatsoever, who are either, it's done by the MD or a sales manager with no real kind of marketing expertise in the background. And again, I'll go in, spend some time with them, and just help them focus on the key things that could make the biggest changes and bring them more wins with that, extremely limited marketing capacity if they want to kind of be self-sufficient from a business growth perspective. So yeah, they're my two little plugs, if that's all right.
Of course, no, that sounds great, and I think it sounds like you've got quite an exciting year coming up by pushing those two things as well. Obviously, what I'll do is I will leave links to all of the relevant social profiles and websites in the description of the episode. So if anyone listening wants to go and connect with Rachel, go and check out her website, and obviously keep up to date with all these amazing new initiatives that she's got coming up. But other than that, I would just like to say thank you for joining us today, Rachel. It's been a pleasure. I think there's been
Yeah.
some really interesting topics that we've covered, some really interesting insights. And yeah, as I say, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
No worries at all. Thanks, Rachel. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Freelancing Friends podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I would love to hear any feedback you have. Remember to head on over to freelancingfriends.co.uk and join the community today. Also, be sure to follow the podcast on your favourite streaming services.